She was electric, unexpected, and impossible to forget. Junkie Joplin sang more than just blues. She cut them up on stage. But behind her rough voice and drunken smile was a mess that not even her biggest fans saw coming. The world thought it was just another rock disaster when they heard she had died at age 27. What about the official autopsy? It said something much scarier in its whisper. A hotel room by itself. One last phone call. A blank space that made us wonder more than it replied. We are going to look into the strange and mysterious details that are hidden in Joplin's autopsy report in this movie. Facts that have been hidden under myths for a long time. The story being told is not the same as the tale. And it all starts here, at the grave. Janis Joplin was discovered dead in room 105 at the Landmark Motor Hotel in Hollywood, California, early on October 4, 1970. Her road manager found out about it because he was worried when she didn't show up for a recording session that she was supposed to be at. He discovered a scene that would spook people in the music business. Joplin's body was face down on the floor next to her bed, with no signs of damage right away. Through her death, one of rock's most powerful and emotionally raw voices came to an abrupt stop. There were small but telling features in the room itself. Everyday things, loose change, a new pack of smokes, and the key to her room were all lying around near her. These made it look like she had just come back from a short trip to the vending machine in the hotel entrance. It was the kind of boring task that gave the tragedy a scary sense of normalcy. She didn't think the night would end with death. Her clothes and makeup were found on the table, which shows she wasn't acting frantically before she died. Even though later it was said that drugs were found at the scene, there were no signs of a fight, a break-in, or any injuries. No one had touched the bed, and there were no signs of fear or violence in the room. These were some of the signs that the coroner saw that the overdose had likely happened alone and in private. This supported the sad idea that one of music's bravest artists had died by himself. What's so creepy about this place is how different it is from how people usually think of Joplin. When she was on stage, she was crazy and electric, and it looked like her pain came out with every note. She was quiet when she died. Another kind of story could be heard in that hotel room, one of silence. Maybe she's been through a lot behind the wails of her voice and the bright light of the stage. Room 105 would become an important part of rock history, not just because it's where Janis Joplin died. It was also where the energy of an age lost one of its loudest voices. The room told one story, but the lab data told a different one. That made her last dose a lot scarier than anyone had thought at first. Findings in toxicology. The official autopsy report proved what a lot of people already thought. Janis Joplin passed away from an H-. Toxicology tests showed only booze and H-, even though she was known to like Southern Comfort whiskey. There were no barbiturates, steroids, or other drugs used for fun found. The two drugs, which both slow down the central nervous system, killed the person who took them together. There were other things, though, that made people worry. It was the extremely high danger level of that stood out. Reports from that week in Los Angeles said that a very strong batch was going around among users there. Investigators thought that between 40% and 50% of Joplin used to be pure. At that time, the average on the street was cut down to less than 10%, which was a lot less than that. Many people were taken off guard by this dangerously pure product, even longtime users like Joplin. Several other overdoses were reported in the same neighborhood just days after Joplin's death, which highly suggests that she wasn't the only person killed in that batch. Was discovered in room 105. It included a syringe, a spoon with residue on it, and other things that would have been found recently. The medical examiner's opinion that she died by accident was supported by these findings. Given Joplin's history with polyps, the fact that there were none of them around suggested that she may have only intended to take for fun that night and not to kill herself. There were no signs that she had taken her own suicide note or planned to hurt herself in the past, which supported the idea that she had underestimated how strong. Many people were curious about not only Joplin's personal choices after the fact, but also who gave her. Friends and people who knew her well wondered if a famous dealer had sold her the batch without telling her how strong it was. No one was ever officially charged with her death. The very strong change ruined the nightlife in Los Angeles and brought up bigger issues of duty in illegal drug distribution. In Joplin's case, one dose of the wrong drug was fatally unpredictable, showing that even the most skilled drug abusers can die from a mistake. Needle mark a debate. Quick reports from people who were there right after Janis Joplin's death mentioned an odd detail. She didn't have any needle marks that could be seen right away. Some people thought this person's absence was odd because they were thought to be a constant. In the beginning, it led to the idea that either she hadn't been an injector regularly or someone was trying to hide how she died. There were no obvious injection sites, which didn't match up with the official conclusion. This made people wonder if the scene had been changed before the police came. Reports from people in her group that a friend may have entered the room before the police were called added to the mystery. Some reports said that this person would have taken her down or moved her around, maybe to protect Joplin's image. Or to avoid getting caught. Even though no one was ever charged and the stories were never officially proven, they became part of music history and added a new twist to what was already a sad situation. The idea that she might have faked her death or tried to hide it made people even more interested in what really happened in room 105. When the coroner's report was finished, it showed that there were faint needle punctures that rescue workers did not notice right away. These punctures, on the other hand, have the deep scars that people who use intravenous lines for a long time usually have. This difference added to the mystery. If Joplin had been injecting heroin often, why were there such small signs? The fact that she had just started using heroin again after a short break could be one reason for her death. This could explain why her tolerance level has gone down and there are no physical signs that she regularly uses drugs. There are still rumors decades later because there aren't any clear answers. Even though the investigation confirmed that the person died of an overdose, it is still not clear how, when, or by whom the heroin was injected or if anyone did anything afterward. In Janis Joplin's life, which was full of scandal and no editing, the small problems with her death leave room for doubt and speculation. In the end, the debate over the needle mark reflects both the mystery of her death and the complexity of her turbulent and underappreciated life. The medical accounts also raised concerns about the purity and strength of the drug Joplin used, which was said to be much stronger than what was commonly available at the time. A number of deaths were seen in the same area over the weekend, signaling that maybe a very strong batch had been going around. This made her death even more complicated, both in terms of how it happened and what she took that would have been too much for her body to handle. Some people with a low tolerance could die from even a small amount. This helped to focus the tragedy and show that one moment of use again in the wrong situation could be fatal. The part about the party. Janis Joplin made a big change to her will just 2 days before she died too soon. Many people now see her decision to set aside $2,500 for a party after she died as a strangely prescient sign. It wasn't a full-on funeral or farewell service. She planned the party so that her friends could enjoy it after she was gone. The clause said that the money should be used for a party that lasts all night. What her close friends and family could do to get her name out there. The request was out of character for the woman, who is known for living loudly and not saying sorry. It was also very upsetting that it came at that time. The party was held at the Lion's Share, a pub in San Anselmo, California, that had become a favorite spot for Joplin. About 200 of her friends, co-workers, and fellow artists got together to party. Listen to music and dance. The party, which was paid for by the money she had saved, was full of tears, laughter, and stories, making it hard to tell the difference between a tribute and a last act of resistance. There was no funeral like most people do. For the tough-as-nails artist Joplin, this was the only way to say goodbye that would work. People who have played with death for years think the party clause is a sick joke. For some, though, it's a very personal statement about how she wanted to be remembered. Not as a tragic person, but as a spirit in music that bring people together. Because she made the change so close to her death, some people think she may have known the end was near. Whether it was intuition or an accident, the fact that she added such a specific clause so soon before she died shows that she was aware of how fragile she was. This phrase is often used in biographies and retrospectives these days as one of the best ways to understand Joplin's thoughts. It shows how funny she is, how much she loves being around people, and how she doesn't care about following the rules, even when she's dead. She planned the wake herself. Has become a rock legend, not just because of what it says but also because of how scary it is. In a world that often saw her as a cartoon version of chaos, the party order in her will show that she was clear about how she wanted to be remembered, not in sadness, but with music, chaos, and one last toast. Accounts from eyewitnesses. In the hours after Janis Joplin died, her friends and family started to put together her final day, but they quickly ran into problems. On October 4th, her friends and producer were waiting for her at the recording studio in the morning. She was supposed to record vocals for the song Buried Alive in the Blues. When she didn't show up without giving any warning, alarm bells went off right away. It was nothing like what Joplin usually did. Who took her music seriously, even though she was known for being crazy? Her road manager went to the Landmark Motor Hotel to check on her while she wasn't there and made the sad finding. In the last few days of her life, she had a lot of meetings that gave people different ideas about how she was feeling. Some of her friends said she looked happy and lively, like she was really excited about making her solo album, Pearl. She seemed to be enjoying her recent success and had talked about future projects. Others knew Janis as a very different person, who lived alone, was alone, and may have been emotionally spent. For decades, people have argued about whether she was mentally weak or just caught off guard by a highly toxic dose of the last person known to have talked to Joplin was her road manager, John Cook, who called her late that night, October 3rd. From his point of view, she sounded fine. Her tone of voice and words didn't show that she was upset or acting in a strange way. It was said that she would smoke cigarettes outside and then go back to her room. That conversation, which seemed regular at the time, is now just a cold last detail. She might not have known that she was taking too much of the drug and would die in hours. It's even stranger and less real that she died because there is no frantic behavior, no missed calls, and no obvious signs of distress about it. With all of these different stories and timelines, it's still hard to say what exactly happened in Joplin's last hours. Was she just a victim of a lot of drugs that killed at the wrong time? Or was there something else going on? Whether mentally or not. Eyewitness reports that didn't always match up showed how hard it was to understand someone like Joplin, whose life was always teetering between moments of pure happiness and crushing sadness. Finally, her death not only left a hole in the studio, but it also left those who knew her best puzzled for a long time. But Janis herself had memories that were not consistent with those of those closest to her. On national TV, who may have shown the most obvious signs of what she was really going through. Honest last talks. The last interviews that Janis Joplin did for the public show how troubled she was on the inside during her troubled fame. Her last visit on the Dick Cavett Show stands out as a moving moment in music history. There was a hint of weariness in her demeanor, even though she seemed lively, funny, and quick-witted, swapping playful jabs with Cavett and charming the studio audience. As a friend and frequent interviewer, Cavett made fun of Joplin's looks and character. She laughed it off with smiles and moments of vulnerability. She was honest about how lonely it was to be famous and how, even though she was always surrounded by fans and artists, she often felt emotionally alone. The most important thing about what she said was how upset she was with how people saw her. Joplin made a name for herself by singing about honest, raw emotions, but she started to feel like people cared more about how she looked than how she played. She felt stuck by the picture of the wild, heavy drinking, uncontrollable rock star. She helped create this image, but it would eventually take over her music. When I talked to her for my interviews, she claimed that she was being criticized and that critics would rather talk about how she lived her life and her stage antics than her singing or writing lyrics. An overwhelming desire to be understood and not just seen was something she often felt. Joplin wanted people to notice her work, not just see how much pain she was in it. These conversations have a deeper and more tragic meaning now that we can look back on them. Since then, biographers and cultural observers have talked about times in her last media outings when she seemed a little upset. Crying out loud, rapid changes in tone, and short bursts of sadness. Behind the bluster, there was someone who was very aware of how emotionally weak she was. People used to love how honest and rebellious she was, but now they see her honesty as a coded way to ask for help. The things that made her interesting, like how intense, unstable, and eager to show herself she was, could have also been signs of deeper, more hidden pain. Lastly, these conversations are very different from the lies that have been spread about her since then. They don't show Joplin as a mythical figure, but as a woman who is trying to find a balance between being loved by everyone and feeling empty inside. Her charm hid a complicated personal life. One that she tried to describe with more and more desperation in her last days. These on-camera moments were some of the few times she seemed to really let down her guard, showing a person who was dealing with identity, legacy, and the limits of what fame could really do for them. A lot of fans and researchers see these talks as more than just old things. They are sad memories of things that were lost, ignored, or just not understood. In the history of a story. Problems with biopics. The long-running project to make a movie about Janis Joplin's life has been one of the most difficult and controversial in Hollywood film history. With actress Shailene Woodley set to play the famous singer, the current project has sparked both joy and doubt. The movie got money from the California Film Commission and started pre-production with a $10 million budget, but its artistic future is still unknown. The big problem is with the Joplin estate, which has strict rules about who can use her music. If filmmakers don't get permission to use her original songs and vocal records, they won't be able to show the part of Joplin's life that made her famous, her voice. This problem has been around for a while. A number of previous efforts to make a biopic about Janis Joplin have failed because of legal issues or a lack of ideas. When Silver Reel Partners and LKL Productions went to court over the rights to the script Get It While You Can in 2015, it was one of the most well-known failures. The lawsuit said there was a breach of contract and meddling with intellectual property. This put the project on hold for now, when it looked like it was speeding up. Over the years, other versions with women like Amy Adams, Zooey Deschanel, and Pink have been talked about, but they never happened because of problems with the Joplin estate's rights, money, or ideas. The work team faces a unique problem today. Can they tell the truth about Janis Joplin's life without the music that made her famous? Getting her music not only adds emotional and historical weight to the film, but it also determines how deeply people will connect with it. Joan Joplin's singing wasn't a sound that stood out. Her hurt, defiance, and sensitivity were all shown through it. If her estate doesn't give the creators full rights to her recordings, they might have to use cover versions or original songs written in her style, which could turn off fans and make the film seem less trustworthy. In the form of a biography. A lot of people are talking about how estates handle the remains of famous artists because of this case. It makes sense to want to protect Janis Joplin's memory, but some say that too much control can stop creative tributes and limit how future generations can interact with her life story. A good biography can bring Joplin back to the attention of new viewers and strengthen her place in cultural heritage, but only if it stays true to the spirit of her work. There are currently secret talks going on that will decide if Janis Joplin's real voice can finally be used on screen. This will affect both the Shailene Woodley project and the skill of the filmmakers. Disconnect between generations today. Disconnect between generations today. In this highly curated digital age, Janis Joplin's unpolished, raw approach to music and performance is very different from what many younger listeners expect in terms of style and feeling. Gen Z audiences often find Joplin's rough vocals, wild energy, and emotional openness shocking and hard to put into a single category because they grew up in a time when pop stars are polished, auto-tuned, and backed by whole branding teams. Her music doesn't have the smoothness and rhythmic accuracy that are popular right now. Instead, it feeds on unpredictability and raw emotion, traits that were once praised but could now be seen as lacking in technical skill or commercial appeal. In the 1960s, Joplin's completely honest music was very new. She showed how hurt she was, wailed through pain, and took on a stage personality that wasn't traditionally female or made to appeal to a wide audience. But in today's society, which is shaped by visual media like Instagram and TikTok, where appearance is more important than content, that same vulnerability can be seen as careless or even fake. The people who read today are used to looking for clues, so that Joplin's bare speech will sound strange or uncomfortable because of filters and fast-paced material. There is a difference between generations in both taste and the way people interact with famous figures. Because of this disconnect, music critics and historians are going back and forth over how to best honor Joplin's memory in a way that speaks to modern audiences. Some people think that her strong emotions will always influence anyone who listens with an open heart. Others think that new fans might not understand why her music is important if it is not framed through documentaries, education, or carefully chosen introductions. If you don't know what kind of personal and cultural pain she was getting into, you might only hear shrieking where there was once soulful expression in turmoil, in places where there was once relief. Still, there is hope. These days, people are talking more and more about mental health, being real, and showing feeling. Joplin's life and music may become important again. Being open and honest in public, questioning beauty standards, and singing with raw emotion instead of technical skill may speak to young fans who are looking for realness in a world that is mostly fake. To close the gap, though, careful reintroductions, well-done biopics, and platforms that are willing to praise the beauty of flaws will have to be used. Janis Joplin's voice is from another time and place until it can be heard properly again. Until then, she is both timeless and out of step. The grave of Bessie Smith. Giving money to help pay for Bessie Smith's tombstone was one of the most moving and important things Janis Joplin did in her life. It happened just a few weeks before she died. Smith was one of the most important singers of the early 20th century. He died in a terrible car accident in 1937 and was buried in a Philadelphia graveyard without a marker. Even though she had a big effect on American music, her final resting place was ignored and forgotten because of racial and economic inequality. This was very unfair to Joplin, who looked up to Smith as both a musical and spiritual leader. With the help of Juanita Green, a woman who knew Smith and had worked for her family before, Joplin paid for the headstone that would finally give the famous singer a proper grave. Joplin had more in common with Bessie Smith than just her music. She saved my life. As a young, white girl in Texas who felt alone and rejected, Joplin found comfort in the sad, soulful blues that Smith had recorded many years before. She talked a lot about feeling like she didn't belong, and Smith's honest, unfiltered portrayal of pain, joy, and struggle spoke to her in a way that few other artists could. Joplin wasn't just envious of Smith's voice. It hit home for her. She once said she wanted to be the first black woman who was also white, which shows how much blues culture shaped who she was. Smith's refusal to follow social rules and her never-ending creativity gave Joplin ideas for how to live and sing without giving in. There was more to the headstone than just a tribute to a hero. It says, "The greatest blues singer in the world will never stop singing." It showed what Joplin believed in and how she wanted to honor people who were forgotten, pushed to the side, or left out. During her lifetime, Joplin often stood up for people who didn't fit in and tried hard to be a voice for those who felt like they didn't have one. It wasn't a charity project or a marketing stunt that paid for Bessie Smith's monument. For another woman, her work had caused her pain, prejudice, and public misunderstanding. This was a statement of solidarity. This was a way for Joplin to thank Smith for making the spiritual and artistic paths possible. This act of remembering is now likely the most moving and admirable thing Joplin did in her short but important life. It shows how strongly she feels about what she believes and how determined she is to keep important stories from going underground, in any way. Even though Joplin was a symbol of the bad things that happened in the counterculture in the 1960s, scenes like this show that she was true to herself and her memory. Janis Joplin wasn't just paying respect to the past when she talked about Bessie Smith. She was also telling the music industry and the rest of the world how they should treat their pioneers. In terms of emotional power, it is one of the nicest things she ever did and one that will last forever. While Janis sang about the voices of the past that had been lost, her own story would soon repeat itself in a darker way that still haunts the music world today. What the 27 Club means. When Janis Joplin died at age 27, she joined a disturbing and famous group of singers and artists who also died at the same age. This group has been named the 27 Club. The fact that Janis Joplin is in this private club with Jimi Hendrix, Amy Winehouse, Jim Morrison, and Kurt Cobain has led to decades of speculation, mythology, and analysis. Fans and culture critics alike are interested in the idea that so many groundbreaking artists died at the same time. This has led to a lot of different theories, ranging from numerological coincidences to psychological tipping points. For Joplin, whose fame grew so quickly it was hard to handle. The number 27 came to mean a terrible threshold that she could not survive passing. What's so scary about the 27 Club is that its members' life paths are eerily similar, even though each has their own style and past. Scholars and mental health workers have found things they have in common. Child abuse or chaos when they are young. Rapid rise to fame as a young person, doctor, and the lack of good support systems. Almost too much of Joplin's life fits this trend. As a teenager, she was picked on and shunned, and she used drugs and drink to deal with low self-esteem. When she became famous, she didn't have the emotional tools to handle it. Like the others, her public image was praised for being wild and carefree. Her inner pain was hidden or hard to understand until it was too late. There have been serious conversations about what the music business and the entertainment complex as a whole should do to protect young artists because of these trends. People who are against the system say that it doesn't do enough to help them with their mental health or provide them with a guide. In the case of Joplin, her producers and managers knew she had addiction issues, but the pressure to act, record, and look good seemed to be more important than her health. The 27 Club is both a cultural phenomenon and a warning tale that is still relevant today because of the tension between care and exploitation that it creates. The 27 Club phenomenon is still very much a part of popular society. Not only as a sad accident, but also as a picture of how fame can take over the weakest people. Joplin is very important to this story because she was one of the first members and her death made the time even more mythical. But there is a very real story behind the legend about a young woman who was struggling with the weight of expectation, creative pressure, and being alone. Being a member of the 27 Club brings up important questions about how society admires talent but can't see the pain that drives it. While Janis Joplin's talent should be praised, it is also important to look into the cultural and societal issues that led to her downfall and still put artists in danger who follow in her footsteps. If you thought this look into Janis Joplin's last days was as scary as we did, please click the like button and let us know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to join to hear more music history stories that haven't been told before. Click on the next movie to see another deep cut. You won't want to miss it.